Good morning. We know this morning, the center of our heartbeat in the state of Washington is Malden, Washington. We know that we have 7 million people that would like to wrap their arms around the people who have lost their homes in Malden, Washington. I've just been here in a few minutes and I've met some wonderful people who are coming together to not only help each other through this crisis, but to rebuild this town. And it's been quite heartening, just in a few minutes, to meet the people who want to help each other rebuild this community. This community has been incorporated since 1909. It's been a historic place, and it is a place of the future as well as our current trauma. And I say this is the center of our heartbeats in Washington because we've had this trauma all over Washington, from Bridgeport to Sumner, to points east and west. But this is the place where the whole heart of the town was torn out. The town was demolished. A cataract of fire swept through here from this direction and has now destroyed probably 70–80% of the town, including virtually all of the public assets that we have had. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the symbol of both our trauma and our commitment to rebuilding, and to our commitment to dealing with the fundamental forces that are making these fires so cataclysmic. And these fires have been cataclysmic. In just the last 3 days, we have lost approaching 600,000 acres. Now, to put this in perspective, in the last 3 days, we have lost more acreage to fires than in any single entire year in the history of the state of Washington, except 2015. The enormity of these fires, the geographical scope, the intensity, and the destruction are unequaled in Washington state history. And we ought to rise to that challenge to help those folks who have been so traumatized by these events. And we intend to do everything we can for folks. Now, I just talked to the community briefly to talk about how the state wants to help these families. And one of the first things I recognized is something that is very true that I've learned in 8 years as governor. When your house burns down, it's just not an economic loss. Yes, it's thousands of dollars of your net worth, but it is a theft of your family's history, of your heirlooms, your pictures, your trophies, the things you love in your home. It's a breach of your security. It's ripping out that rug that we all stand on of having a home and feeling secure in that. And that's why it's important to try to give as much security and help as we can to these families who have lost their homes. Now, obviously, it's not just here. I was in Sumner where several homes were lost, at Bunny Lake. We think we're over 100 houses, I believe, statewide. So the level of trauma they have suffered, we ought to meet with the level of compassion. And we're doing everything we can as a state to do that. As you know, I've declared an emergency. This morning we freed up several $100,000 from our emergency fund for cash assistance. We want to get some cash to these families so they can eat and have a little bit of clothing and a little bit of whatever they need to survive in the upcoming weeks. We have a DSHS trailer that arrived yesterday that is helping people through those emergency needs. But those are just small things, but they are important things to help these families right now. I want to thank the people who have had an outpouring of assistance that are making contributions to the community. We are doing our small part in the state. The first thing our state did for this community is I delivered to the mayor a box of Honeycrisp apples that Trudy and I picked this morning from the governor's apple tree. I hope you enjoy them, Mayor.
Oh, they look delicious.
You already had one or
no? No, not yet, but they look delicious.
I think you're going to like them. I want to comment on the response of this community has been superb. The mayor's leadership has been incredible through difficult days. Sheriff Myers The work that your organization did is tremendous. Mike, is it Melcher? Mike Melcher was on duty. He's here today. And he told me about seeing this wall of fire come through. And he led and was involved in the evacuation where we had no serious injuries, which is quite remarkable. And I think Mike and the sheriff are examples of what we're seeing all across the state. The professionalism of our firefighters, our sheriffs and police organizations, our citizens to help each other. Now, our hearts are broken by the loss of the young boy in the Colville area. I know when we saw his picture, we melted, and we hope that family's going to do as well as humanly possible. And we want to keep them in our hearts as we move forward on this. The things the state will be engaged in the next several weeks is assessing our level of damages to determine if we can qualify for federal assistance from Malden and other places. And that is dependent largely on the amount of loss that we suffer. And so we cannot make a categorical statement about that today, but I can pledge to you we will be as aggressive as possible trying to obtain federal assistance in the Federal Disaster Loan Program and Grant Program to help these communities and individuals. Now that also makes money available for the city, because the city lost everything. City Hall, post office, you name it. They were operating on a picnic table when I first called the mayor day before yesterday. So this federal help can also help municipalities, and we will be aggressive if we have any shot of obtaining help in that regard. But we know these are going to be frustrating days for this community. We also, we hope this afternoon to have a discussion about how we could give guidance for the cleanup of all the material that's going to need to be cleaned up. And we hope to have that phone call this afternoon, Madam Mayor. Now, if I can, I think that it's worthy of a comment about how we can respect these families who have lost so much in preventing the next families from losing their homes. And you see these losses, and you understand that heartache. I believe it calls upon us all to do whatever effort we can to prevent these fires. And we know there's multiple things we need to do. As individuals, we need to be really careful with not only fire, but sparks. And I'm encouraging all Washingtonians the next few days to be more than cautious when you're outside in any conditions. And the reason is that this grass, these trees, are drier than perhaps anything we've ever seen. In Sumner yesterday, they told me the humidity was 8%. 8%, the chief told me that when it gets down to about 20, we generally consider it indefensible. So the conditions are so explosive in the state of Washington right now due to the lack of humidity, the heat, and the wind. We ask people to be extraordinarily cautious. Second, we know we need to do whatever we can to help both local and state firefighting assets. And we know that these expenses are going to be considerable for the local communities, and the state's going to have to step up and help replace some of the local dollars that have been extended in these firefighters. Third, we need to do, where we can, management of some of our forests, which we are doing. We're spending millions of dollars right now thinning some of our forests so they're less explosive. And we're doing that across the state of Washington. But that's not something you can do in a week. We're doing a small percentage every year to try to make our forests less explosive. And we do know that we are operating in changing conditions. I just talked to the incident commander about this. We do know that we're living in a new Washington. We're living in a Washington where explosive fire seasons are becoming, unfortunately, routine, not the exception. In the last 5 years, we've had 3 of the worst fire seasons ever in the history of the state of Washington. And we know why this is happening. We know why the grass becomes drier and the heat goes up and even wind goes up. And that's because our climate is changing. So we have to take reasonable approaches to deal with that. And you know, when I kind of think about this, we talk about this as a wildfire. I think we have to start thinking they're more climate fires. They're climate fires because that's what creates the conditions that makes them so explosive. And I look forward to our state pulling together to try to prevent the conditions that makes Washington a tinderbox. And I hope that we can pull together to take some action. I will be thinking of these homes and thinking of these families when we are taking action in that regard. Their loss demands action by the state of Washington. So I'd like to turn this over to the mayor if you'd like to make some comments. Madam Mayor, would you like to say anything or not?